The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
All right, folks, welcome to episode 204 of the Pesky Report, brought to you by Belly Up Sports. I'm Ed Hand, and I am joined today by Brandon Brewer. How are you, Brandon?
I'm doing well, ready for Duval in Boston. Let's go.
Well, it hasn't been confirmed yet, but hopefully, we're going to be talking a little bit about that, so hopefully by the time you hear this, that'll be a little more set in stone. But I'm very excited for our guest tonight. We've got Mac Cerullo, who is a Red Sox beat reporter. And Mac is also one of my favorite Twitter follows because when there are press conferences with Red Sox officials, it's sort of an art form taking down quotes. I've tried to do this before when we had interviews on, and it's hard to pick out the ones that are right for it. And Mac, I feel like always hits when he picks out quotes. So that's already something I'm very excited for. But how are you doing today, Mac? How are you doing? It's really good to have you here.
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for the kind words. Yeah, the press conference, it's funny. You do this long enough and you, I guess, get an ear for it and learn to type really fast. I don't know. It's funny. Well, we've had a lot of press conferences this offseason too. So, for better or worse, they're making moves. There's obviously a lot of debate over whether or not they're the right moves, but it's been certainly a lot to talk about. That's for sure.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking about all of that. But before we get started, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Is your background in journalism? Where'd you go to school?
First of all, I work for the Eagle Tribune, so we'll start with that. So my job is I cover the Red Sox for the Tribune as well as the other affiliated papers. So like you see me in the Salem News, Gloucester Daily Times, Newburyport Daily News. That's where I kind of came up and where I came from. I was the sports editor there for a while, and sort of the high school guy for most of the early years of my career. You asked about where I went to school. You can kind of see over my shoulder. Always repping UConn. Did some grad school at Boston University. Kind of cut my teeth covering UConn athletics back during the golden years of the, Kemba Walker's championship season, the Fiesta Bowl. There was a really good time to be at UConn, I'll tell you that. It was a lot of really good stuff going on. Matt Barnes and George Springer were both playing baseball there at the time too. Obviously now I've been on the Red Sox beat for about a year. The All-Star break of 2021, so about a season and a half, we'll say. And it's been a blast, man. It's what an amazing opportunity to be able to cover this team, even if we'll say 2022 was a little bit of a downer overall.
A little bit of not the ideal time to come in, but were you a Red Sox fan growing up?
Yeah, of course. Big sports fan growing up in general. I think you could ask around the beat, any of the pro beats in Boston. Almost everybody will tell you the same thing. I mean, everybody kind of comes to this through a shared love of sports, and to be able to do it for a living is really awesome.
Yeah, I mean, what was your favorite team? Which Red Sox team do you really feel the most connected with, I guess?
It's funny. It's almost cliche to say the 2004 team, but in that case, it's really true and it's really earned. I'm 32. So I was in high school, actually just entering high school during the 2004 season, and I really got into the team for the first time in the playoffs, the 2003 playoff run. And so when 2004 rolled around, I was like, all right, you know what? I'm in. It was the first time I'd watched every game. It was the first time I really was picking up the sports section every day, reading the Globe, reading, whatever I could get my hands on. And let's just say that it was a good return on my investment emotionally. time wise, it worked out. So yeah. Well, that was definitely the most enjoyable fan experience I've ever had by far. And certainly the most formative, I would say. I think I would have turned out a lot more cynical, like most older Red Sox fans, for sure, had that gone south. Like so many had happened before.
I mean, 2003, there was that whole. I mean, do you have a Boone home run story? Like, what your reaction to that was? If that was your first real postseason you were watching.
I listened to that one on the radio, actually. I was technically not supposed to be up that late. I was, I think it was past my bedtime back when such was a thing. And I had like a little Nickelodeon clock in my room that had a radio. So I would listen to the games after I was in bed. And I think I remember that one when it happened. I just kind of turned it off. I was like, all right, I'm going to sleep now.
Yeah, because that was like what, like 13th
like,
inning. That was late. That was real late, like 13th inning or so. So it was definitely past your bedtime, young man.
Yeah, I'd say so. Well, I think I passed out for a couple of innings before I like woke up. I was like, oh God, is it like what happened? So I like hit the button. I think it was like right after, like maybe even right after. And I was just like, okay, that's good night.
So 2004, were you allowed to stay up for the Poppy walk-offs, or was that also past your bedtime?
The first. Oh wow, that's a great scene. I'm glad you brought that one up. So the first, the game 4, I did not make it until so my dad actually played an excellent prank on me that night. I woke up the next day not knowing the result, and he told me that they lost. And so when I turned on Sports Center and got the Globe, I was the best kind of confused. And game 5 that night, the game started at like 4, so that was like still a reasonable hour, so I was up for that one. And don't worry, I made up. I was 14 years old, so let's let you know. I am not sleeping in the press box these days. I can promise you that.
I just remember sleeping because that was a school night for the first one for the Ortiz walk-off home run. That was a school night, so I slept through that one also. But yeah, sorry, Brandon, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was going to say, like, I guess I'm the old man of the show because 2003 was my freshman year of college. And so 2004, I was in college doing my thing, probably hammered drunk for every single game. Specifically, the first 3 games, I was drowning my sorrows of the ALCS. And then from game 4 until game 7, I was just drunk with jubilation. And I do remember game 7 specifically. I was very much intoxicated, but still hanging on the edge of every single pitch of that game. Somehow I was at that nice balance of drunk but still aware of what you were doing and what was going on and the magnitude of what was happening. And oh man, like that was a probably the best feel-good moment that I've ever had while drinking alcohol and watching baseball simultaneously. Usually it doesn't end well.
I can't even imagine, man. That would have been quite a time to be in college, especially in Boston. I don't know if you were in school in Boston, but boy, that would have been something else.
It was wild. I wasn't in Boston at the time. I actually was at Gardner-Webb University in North Carolina, but there was a really big baseball following at that school. They had a really good baseball team and a lot of fans from all around the country were there. So I remember sitting there watching that game with a bunch of Cubs fans who also could sympathize with not winning World Series for 1.5 million years. So they were super excited for us to be able to come back from 3 games down against the Yankees and then go on to the World Series. Whether we won it or not, we didn't care at that point because it was like, we beat the Yankees. We're on top of the world, baby. Let's go.
I'm sure they were happy when the Sox beat the Cardinals. I mean,
that
like beating their Yankees, I guess, right?
Yeah, that's a bitter rival for the Cubbies. So yeah.
And so moving on from days past to days forward. as Brandon alluded earlier, there's been some talk about Adam Duvall joining the Red Sox. That some have said that they're pretty close to an agreement. Some have said that it's a little further away, but that we'll know by the end of the week. Have you heard anything on this matter?
I can't say that I can report anything that isn't already out there. All I can really say on this one is that it makes a whole lot of sense for sure.
Agree.
You're talking about a guy who is a Gold Glove caliber defender. He was only 2 years ago, he hit 38 home runs and had 113 RBIs. For the most part, throughout his career, I mean, this is a guy who has been a productive power bat in center field, which is exactly what the Red Sox could use right now. Kike, one of the luxuries of having him, and presumably he'll be healthy. I mean, what happened to him last year was pretty rough. That's a very productive piece that you can slot in almost anywhere on the diamond, right? So if you get Duvall, then you can move Kike to presumably to shortstop, and then maybe just roll with Arroyo until something happens with him, because injuries are obviously a concern. Duvall, maybe not. He's getting older. He's in his mid 30s now, so there's some risk there. But given the circumstances, and especially if you get him on a 1 or 2 year deal, makes perfect sense. Would absolutely be a signing. I think the Red Sox, a lot of people would be excited about, and for good reason.
So you think that he makes sense in center field? Where would you move Kike to in that scenario?
Well, as the roster is currently constituted, shortstop. But that's not to say that the Red Sox couldn't also find another person to play shortstop. I think because the trick is basically if you do move Kike into the infield, now you have a hole at center field. Yoshida is not a center fielder. I don't know. I actually had a chance to talk to some people who are really in on the Japanese baseball scene. And when I asked about the defense, they were kind of just like, it's not a strength of his game, not really. So you stick him in left field. Verdugo, we know, can play right field pretty well. We also know that he can be a little bit of an adventure in center field, or at least he has been in the past. So your best bet is either find at least one, if not two people to play in the middle infield, or move Kike and make sure you find somebody who can play center field. So Duvall would allow the Red Sox the opportunity to do the latter. And honestly, at that point, maybe you can just go and hope for the best. I think the Red Sox, Bloom has been pretty upfront about being like, no, we're adding multiple people, and I don't see any reason to why that wouldn't be the case. So at least as a start, it would give the team a complete lineup, if not enough depth, perhaps, but at least it would be an important first step.
Yeah, especially the power bat too, because they're really, besides Rafi Devers, there isn't really an additional person that's really a threat to leave the field for any at bat. So I think that it does make a lot of sense with Duvall there. Now you mentioned Yoshida. What did you hear about him? Because that's there. I think this is the first Japanese position player that we've really seen the Red Sox sign, isn't it?
I believe so. All the others that I'm aware of have been pitchers, so kind of a different look. So I had a chance. So I was sort of looking into him actually for a while before really he was even on the Red Sox. Publicly on the Red Sox radar. They've been scouting him for years. He's been a huge priority for a long time, honestly. I think he's very interesting. We'll have to sort of see how he translates to the big leagues. But you see what he's done in Japan. There's a lot to like. I mean, this guy never strikes out, ever. He walks a ton. He's good, really, good bat to ball skills, sneaky good power. I don't really know how that's going to translate because, Yoshida's not a very big guy. He's like 5'9", 180, something like that. I haven't looked at the measurements recently, but definitely if you had me stand next to him, you wouldn't necessarily look at either one of us and be like, wow, that guy's really big or that guy's really small, which is kind of all you need to know about him. That being said, the Red Sox are super high on him. They think he could be a star. And you know, a lot of people in the wider baseball community are a little bit more dubious, but I think, you know, Red Sox fans should probably open their minds to the possibility that he actually could be like not just a piece, but like a real get. Just based on everything I've heard, this guy was an absolute monster in Japan, and you know, if nothing else, you know, having a guy who never strikes out, walks a ton, has a little bit of pop, and you know, can, you know, spray the ball all over the field, collect, you know, a bunch of singles and doubles. I think most people, Red Sox fans, would be in on a guy like that, right? So, very excited to see what he can do. He's a very fascinating addition for sure.
I think the key there that you just said was spray the ball all over the field. And as a left-handed bat, taking aim at that monster is going to be beautiful for him because he can just kind of slap it the opposite field and just get himself a quick little double to lead off a game or lead off an inning or whatever. That'll be very nice to have.
For sure, for sure. And also the change in the rules where like the people aren't going to be able to shift against him as well as they might have been able to before. I feel like that could be a sneaky big, it could be sneaky important for him.
I've heard some comparisons with his hitting style to someone kind of like Alex Verdugo, but with more, he has more patience. Would that be an apt comparison, in your opinion?
I've never thought of it that way. I guess that could be a pretty good comp. Yeah, I mean, it's, to be honest, actually, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, think about it. Like Alex Verdugo is a guy who, you know, if he were to ever live up to his full potential, I mean, you know, as a former top 100 prospect, you know, all of his skill set in general is pretty awesome, right? It's just like at this stage in his career, he hasn't quite unlocked his full potential. Whereas right now, you look at him, he's like, that guy is like a decent starting caliber player. Whereas if he did everything he can do just a little bit better, now you're like, oh my God, this guy is an all-star and like a building block. So if Yoshida comes in and he can be like that, yeah, I don't see. I think a lot of people would be very happy with him at that rate.
What do you think of all the rumors that are circulating on everyone's favorite toxic website, Twitter, about the potential of trading Verdugo?
You know, I think it's less likely now than I would have guessed earlier in the offseason, because the problem with trading Verdugo is the same as it would be if you were to trade Tristan Casas or if you were to, move Kike into any other position. You're creating another hole. And at this stage in the game, I don't see really any way the Red Sox could trade Verdugo and make it really worth their while, at least right now. You know, the reason why he was a popular trade candidate, you know, among the Twitter sphere was because, you know, he's theoretically got the highest upside and is sort of also the, you know, just seemed like the most likely candidate because with the Red Sox, he you know, we believe that this guy could be an all-star who could be like a batting champion type of guy who could do all this great stuff. And it just hasn't happened yet. But that's not to say that it can't happen. So really the question is, do the Red Sox believe he has the ability to take the next step? You know, Alex Cora in his press conference to end the year last year, I think, you know, Cotillo was asking him, like, you know, who do you think could take a step forward next year? Cora literally did not even let him finish the question before he was like, Alex, you know, we want to, we basically in a way was like damning with faint praise, right? He's like, we think this guy can be so much better, but also read between the lines. It's like, we also think this guy could be so much better, if you know what I mean. You know, he's you know, Verdugo, he's been, you know, certainly a great presence in the clubhouse. I've always enjoyed talking to him. You know, I feel like he's got the ability to be so much. I think there's so much there. So, you know, a team like, you know, on another opposing team sees that too, and they're like, okay, like, you know, that's a guy we could certainly, you know, bring in. We, you know, he'd be valuable. But the problem is that the value versus what the Red Sox need in return, it doesn't match up. You know, Verdugo is realistically a guy you trade if you're willing to get a bunch of prospects in return, but the Red Sox aren't. That's not what they need right now in this stage of their competitive cycle.
Yeah.
Who do you see that, if not Verdugo, who do you see as potential guys off the 40-man the Red Sox could trade?
Tanner Houck was definitely, to me, seems like by far the most likely because same reason, he's valuable. he's, I'm not suggesting that you trade him because you think he stinks. Quite the opposite. Houck could be really good. But the problem right now is that what is Tanner Houck? The Red Sox don't seem to know, because every time he came up as a starting pitcher and then they switch him to the bullpen, then you move him back to the starting rotation, then you move him back to the bullpen. He's been quite successful in both of those roles. Like, this is a guy who can really pitch, but, is he necessarily one of your best options to be in the starting rotation this season? Right. Theoretically, obviously we'll see with health permitting. You got Sale, you got Paxton, you got Pivetta, you got Kluber, and then presumably you're going to go with one out of the three of Whitlock, Bayo, and Houck. So you got 7 starters. You're trying to pick 5. Well, maybe somebody gets hurt at some point in spring training and makes that decision easier. But is Houck necessarily going to be one of those top 5 guys? Maybe, but it's, the Red Sox don't necessarily need him in their bullpen right now either. Like, it'd be, obviously he's proven he can be a good reliever, but maybe if instead you can trade him for, say, that piece that you could really use in the middle infield, maybe he's the guy you use to get, you run through the list of guys, the whole bunch of guys right now who are, linked to the Red Sox as possible trade candidates. Houck seems to me is by far the most likely candidate who an opposing team would be like, we'll take that guy. He can help us now. And he's got, 5 years of team control, at least, something like that. I don't think it's even close, to be honest. Anybody else is, in my opinion, untradeable. Like, the Red Sox just would never do it. And then anybody else who's currently in the minors is just too far away, and they wouldn't necessarily be as enticing for the acquiring team.
What about guys like Jarren Duran and Bobby Dahlbeck?
Well, I mean, I think those guys definitely could be trade candidates too, but they're not as valuable as Houck is. Like, there's some real upside there. Whereas with Dahlbeck, there's upside too. Frankly, he just needs a change of scenery. But there are those, everybody knows the flaws. I mean, he's a guy who has, is theoretically capable of like hitting like 40 home runs. But the problem is he's just got way too many holes in his swing. Everybody's seen it watching him play day in and day out. Like, the other scouts and other teams see it too. So Dahlbeck could be traded. It's possible he even, most likely will be traded, but that's not necessarily going to be like a particularly, I wouldn't say it's going to be a blockbuster deal. That one strikes me as one where the Red Sox trade him for like some enticing prospect who's at least 2 years away, if that makes sense. And with Duran, I think kind of the same deal, but in his case, actually, I think the Red Sox really kind of need to keep him around because with the outfield depth and the up the middle situation being what it is, if Duran's going to be a part of the solution, it's kind of put up or shut up time right now. So, I feel like it's more likely they keep him around. Maybe he gets one more shot in the big leagues this year, and either it's going to work and it'll be great, or it won't, and at least we'll know for sure that it's at that point he's probably getting DFA'd or something. So we'll see.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of that with the construction of the team, that they haven't really been able to trade the guys that have been DFA'd. We saw that today. I mean, Connor Siebold, they're getting a player to be named later or cash for, but we've seen that with just about everybody that's been dropped. Jeter Downs, Darwinson Hernandez, the list just goes on, that they haven't really been able to get a lot of value back for that. Do you think that we will see a trade just to of multiple guys for one guy? Like, maybe they could move Dahlbeck with Houck and somebody else to get one other player back. Do you think something like that is in the works, or is it more, where are they at with that?
Well, I can't say I know where they're at as far as what discussions are having, because they're very tight-lipped about that kind of thing for obvious reasons. But it would sure make a lot of sense if you could try to get like 3 or 4 guys off the roster somehow. You can kind of like fantasize about any number of possibilities. Like, you put together a package of Houck as sort of your lead thing, throw Dahlbeck in there, and then toss in a couple of lower minor sweeteners to I don't know, kind of grease the wheels or whatever in exchange for Hassan Kim, for example. Would the Padres make that deal? Maybe, probably, maybe not. But it's at least to me, it seems like that's one of the more likely deals that they could swing. That being said, it's tough to say. The trade market's been weird this year because, like, usually you expect a lot more teams to be interested in prospects, whereas really even the non-contending teams are kind of looking for major league caliber players. And there's only so many of those to go around, and the good teams don't want to. They don't usually want to give up players like that. So interesting to sort of see where, how it'll play out.
You think the MLB expanded playoffs has anything to do with that shift in desire to build later as opposed to building right now? We got to contend for that wild card spot.
It's an interesting theory. There's probably something to that. I think it's just it seems like these things happen in cycles. The people adjust, things kind of go a certain way, and then people zag, and then things change. So it feels like right now with the new CBA, with the new expanded playoffs, there's a whole multitude of factors, but it seems that big league caliber players have, well, in a weird way, never been more valuable, even though that's strange because, like, theoretically, good players should always be valuable, but in a lot of cases that hasn't necessarily been the case. So it's a little bit of a changing landscape. I'm sure the playoffs do have something to do with that. It's definitely a real thing. Like, you get to September and teams who previously would have been just way out of the picture. Now, if you're just hovering around 500, you have a chance. I mean, the Red Sox weren't really out of it last year, even, not really until like early September, before that. I mean, in past years, their goose would have been cooked like by like the end of July practically. Right. So all these teams, see it that way. So it's a real thing, I'm sure.
Now, do you see any of the players, like the rookies, that maybe haven't gotten a lot of hype yet, being able to help the team in 2023? We saw a few of them get added to the 40-man just before the Rule 5 draft, but do you see any of those guys being able to contribute right away?
So we got some kind of tiers. So I'm assuming that you're not referring to guys like Bayo and Cassius, right?
Yeah, we're assuming that Cassis is going to be the first baseman, and Bayo, if not in the rotation, will be the first man up if somebody goes down.
I think, yeah. So those two are, I believe, are going to be important parts of this year's team. The others, it's interesting. Chris Murphy and Brian Mata, Brandon Walter. These guys are all very interesting prospects, where they're all like kind of in the Cutter Crawford stage of their careers. Where are they big league ready pitchers yet? Probably not, but could they be big league, impactful for a couple of weeks at a time? Maybe fill in a double header here or there, or if a guy goes down to injury and the schedule falls a certain way. They give the Red Sox a very the luxury of having a ton of good starting pitcher depth. Whether or not they're because, like, why did Connor Siebel get traded? Basically, well, because he fell behind all those other guys, right? He's like, at this point, like, if the Red Sox have 7 like realistic contenders for the starting rotation, they probably also have about that many guys who are realistically contending for the AAA rotation too. So at a certain point, you need to start making decisions. Those guys, I don't know what extent, and also Winkowski, I should mention, is kind of still, even though he's been around a little longer, is sort of also in that same pool. I think the most likely of that group to really make an impact is Mata. I don't know if he'll do so as a starter, but that dude's got some really filthy stuff. I mean, we're talking like 100 miles per hour with like, the monster off speed stuff, the kind of stuff that like makes him a real weapon. I can see him coming up mid-season or like down the stretch in a bullpen role. His problem is just command. I mean, he really can struggle to find the plate sometimes. So if he can, he didn't spend that long at AAA really last year. So my guess is he starts there, and we'll just wait and see kind of where his command is and kind of how he looks. And if he's, if the Red Sox believe he can be a weapon, I can imagine him playing a real role by August or September. The others we'll see, but maybe less so. Rafaela too, I'll put him in a similar category because if nothing else, that dude's defense is unbelievable. Like, put him in center, shortstop. His bat, everybody he took a big step forward last year, but like that dude's bat is not big league ready just yet. But if they could use a utility kind of spark plug guy who you don't necessarily really give him many at bats, but just stick him in center field for the late innings or stick him at shortstop when somebody needs a day off, that guy could be useful. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see him get some action at some point.
Yeah. Do you think that who do you think the next guy to be DFA'd would be after Siebold if they had to drop somebody at this point? If like let's say Duvall happens and he gets a major league deal, like who would be the next man down?
Oh wow, that's a great question. Well, you know what? The funny thing is that everybody has been speculating it's going to be Brazier for about like the last 6 or 7 roster moves.
He's indestructible, man.
Honestly, like the way that like the front office people talk about him, I think he's. I'm almost comfortable saying he's practically a lock. If nothing else, to at least like start, make it to spring training, which I know a lot of fans that frustrates a lot of fans, but they like him. I don't know if I necessarily understand what the case is, considering the additions they've made and some of the talent they kind of have available. But like he and Caleb Bort. Their cases are a little different, whereas Brazier, at least we know and has proven he can be a very effective big league reliever, even if that isn't always, even if it comes and goes. And last year it really wasn't there a lot. And Ort is kind of a similar type of thing with Mata, where he throws really hard. If nothing else, you can say that about the guy. It's funny, like this is a good problem to have. Like who's left that's really expendable, right? Like, Connor Siebold was kind of a surprise. You're already down Darwin's and Hernandez. I don't think they'll DFA Dahlbeck, but like, I don't know. It's tough. Like we've reached the point now where you have the core team, you have the guys who are definitely not going anywhere. And then you kind of have like people who you're like, all right, like, we don't want to you don't want to lose these guys. It's a good problem to have. I don't truthfully, like, all the good answers I had to this question are gone. We've already they've sort of trimmed the bottom guys off the bottom of the roster. So it'll be interesting to see, which is a very unsatisfying answer to give, I know, but that's where we're at right now.
It does point towards something that I think has been observed as being a strength of the team going into the season, which is that the bullpen has received some tremendous upgrades, especially compared to where they were at last year, where Matt Barnes was kind of the de facto closer by the end of the season. And they brought in Kenley Jansen, they brought in Chris Martin, Jolie Rodriguez. I feel like there's somebody else that I'm forgetting right now. But, Schreiber for after last year, how potentially.
A healthy Josh Taylor.
Well, we'll see about that. No, the bullpen, nobody should have any complaints about what they've done with the bullpen. You couldn't ask for a better offseason as far as that goes. Kenley Jansen is obviously is terrific. One of the best closers of the past decade. I don't know if he'll get Hall of Fame consideration because that's kind of a thorny question with closers in general. But if there's a guy of this generation who's going to get a look, it's going to be him and Kimbrel. Yeah. He's still got it. He's like 35 now, I think, but like still very effective. Obviously, clearly, like no stranger to high pressure situations. Pitched in the playoffs like forever. It seems his whole career practically. Chris Martin, that dude throws strikes. In his command, according to Statcast, I think he might be. I think last time I checked, 100th percentile in walk rate. I'm going to double check that. At least as far as his command goes, it's let's just put it this way. He is the ideal solution to a big problem that a lot of Red Sox relievers have had, which is you never really know what you're going to get, and you're never really sure where it's going to go. He's going to be very reliable in that respect. And just having those two guys really bumps everybody down into more appropriate spots. Maybe Matt Barnes makes you queasy in the 9th inning. Well, how about in the 7th inning? I think he's a pretty effective, guy there, especially if he pitches anything like he did down the stretch where he really seemed to get his act together. And John Schreiber, obviously with relievers, you can never really tell how they're going to, go year to year. But if he's anything like he was last year, that dude pitching in the 6th and 7th inning most of the time, that's going to be a really good thing. And so Chris Martin is 100 percentile in walk rate. So that's hallelujah, right?
He won like five. What was it? 5 people last year, 60 innings, something like that.
Something stupid like that. Yeah.
So sub one whip.
Right. So those guys, that's like 4 guys right there where you're like, okay, like that. Those are 4 really good high leverage guys. And then you go to, the next tier where, people like Zach Kelly, Josh Taylor, the bottom of the bullpen, it's a lot stronger than it was. And, competition's going to be fierce, like out of spring training. If you go, you got 13 pitchers on the roster. So 5 of those guys are going to be in the rotation. So that basically means, who are your 8 guys? Well, maybe 2 of them could be Houck and Bayo. So those 2 guys, plus the 4 guys I mentioned, plus, I don't know, pick the Joely Rodriguez and, Josh Taylor. Presumably you're going to have at least 1 lefty. So how do you like a bullpen like that? I mean, sounds good to me, right?
Yeah, and that's been an issue for a long time with the Red Sox too. You can kind of guess how the starting pitching is going to go based on how overused the relievers are. So the solution to that is just have a ton of relievers.
And
certainly have good relievers.
That too.
And with so many quality arms that could potentially be in the rotation, what are your thoughts about maybe having a 6-man rotation instead of just 5?
It's an interesting thought. I don't think we'll see that, but you can make a compelling case for why it might be a good idea. Because if Chris Sale and James Paxton are both in the rotation, it would behoove you to take it easy with both of them for obvious reasons. So a good way to do that would be to have a 6-man rotation. Everybody gets more rest. Garrett Whitlock, also coming off an injury, not a guy who's necessarily shouldered that big a load throughout his career. Tanner Houck, also coming off an injury, same thing. You could, so I feel like you could make the case, but I haven't heard anything from Alex Cora or the front office that would suggest that's something they're really considering. That being said, we'll see. We'll get to spring training and maybe we'll start seeing they'll start singing a different tune.
Where do you see Nick Pivetta and Corey Kluber kind of, because they seem like the only 2 guys that are kind of going to be workhorses going into this season, which is strange to say for Kluber considering his injury history, but he threw over 160 innings last year, made 30 starts. Do you see them as being at the top of the rotation and kind of, I guess, almost serving as just inning eaters, and then you put the 2 guys like you do Whitlock and Bayo at the back end to kind of compensate for the uncertainty at the front with Sale? Do you see that as something that they could do? How do you see the rotation construction playing out?
So I see Kluber and Pivetta as having the highest floor for obvious reasons. Those 2 guys, at least last year, both pitched basically. They've made it through the entire season. That considering what the Red Sox went through last year, that is a valuable thing. That's a valuable trait to bring. If you can count on those guys to make every start, that's going to help the team a lot. Because with Sale, I mean, that dude at this point, in theory, all those injuries that happened last year were just weird and freaky. It's not. We're not dealing with Tommy John surgery anymore. Now we're dealing with, the man was hit with a comebacker and he fell off his bike. Like, next thing we know, we're going to get to spring training and we're going to find out he got struck by lightning or he got mauled by a bear taking his kids to the zoo or something like that. So you never know. But if he's healthy, that guy can still be an ace. And he's obviously going to be at the top of the rotation if he's healthy and if he's effective. We'll know in spring training. We're all going to see it. If he's Chris Sale, he'll be there. So that's your top 3 in theory. And then so where do you go from there? Well, Whitlock, Houck, and Bayo, and especially Bayo, are super high ceiling guys. Can you count on them reaching their potential this year? We'll see. But if those guys, A, stay healthy, and B, are really good, I mean, let's talk about this. You get a situation where you have a healthy Chris Sale, a Bayo who is just absolutely lighting it up. Whitlock takes the next step up and now is pitching like, say, Evaldi in 2021, let's say. and let's say Houck is also very good. Now the Red Sox have the best starting rotation in baseball, right? So in a weird way, it's like Kluber and Pivetta are the two safest guys. But if things really go well for the Red Sox, we could be sitting here in May being like, what do we do with these guys? Like, one of these guys is objectively our like sixth or seventh best starter. So that fascinates me. I feel like at the start of the season, barring injury, it's going to be Sale, Kluber, Pivetta. Whitlock will start in the rotation. I think that's pretty safe to say. And then in the fifth spot will just be, pick whoever's pitching the best out of the younger guys, or a Paxton maybe. And then, after that, I'll bets are off. We'll see where the chips fall from there.
So you almost seem to have a little bit more of an optimistic outlook than a lot of us have been reading there. I know the lineup though is a bit of a question mark, especially after that Story injury. What do you think the best course of action is to support Rafi Devers up at the top in the middle of the order? Because they really, Yoshida's kind of a question mark. Verdugo, I think we've seen his floor, but who knows if he's going to be able to go above that. Justin Turner, good hitter, but also 38, so kind of risky to depend on him. Whereas you have the opposite with Cassis, who looked promising and in his call-up, but he's a rookie, so you don't really know. Can you feel comfortable putting him in the cleanup spot or something? It's not an ideal situation to be in. And even before the Story injury, it felt like they were still a big bat away. Now it almost feels like they're two. So what do you think the best course of action there would be?
Well, yeah. So, the Story injury really stinks. They can't, realistically, they really can't replace him. Not now. It's too late. That being said, we'll have to see, what happens with him as the year goes on. His surgery, it's like internal bracing surgery, as I understand it, is basically a mini Tommy John that takes about half as long to recover from. And seeing as that he is a position player and not a pitcher, the team is being very like, they're basically being like, we're not sure if we're going to have him back. But based on everything that I've read about the surgery, it's not out of the question that he could at least be a DH by the second half, which would be a big help. But let's just assuming that he's not available for the season. Yoshida and Cassius need to produce. If those guys are good, this lineup will it'll help a lot, I guess, is kind of where I'm at on that. Turner and Verdugo both also need to produce. So it's like with the rotation, the floor is really low, but the ceiling is, they absolutely have to make some additions, at least one, if not two. But you can talk yourself into a lot of things going right, as well as a lot of things obviously going wrong. As far as the top of the lineup goes, right now I think Yoshida leads off. Either Kike or Justin Turner, one of them is hitting second probably because you need a right-handed bat there. Devers probably bats third, and then you kind of try to maybe go left, right from there to whatever extent makes sense. It's a question mark. This is an easier question to answer if and when Duvall comes into the picture and if and when they make any trades. Because as it stands now, the lineup is not complete, and if they start the season with the lineup as it is right now, you're asking for trouble. You're asking for a lot of trouble.
Do you see? Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say there's been a little bit of talk about Christian Arroyo maybe moving as the starting second baseman. Good bat. Last season was the most plate appearances he's had. I think it was about 300. Do you think that he really is only suited as a utility guy just because of the injuries, or do you think he could move into that starting role potentially?
So I wrote about this actually just the other day. The answer is he's good enough to do it, but injuries are a weird beast, right? This dude has been on the injured list 7 times since he joined the Red Sox. That's a real thing, and it's for all kinds of different weird little things here and there. But the very fact of the matter is, him being injury prone is not like a speculative label. Like as it stands now, that is his track record. And so the Red Sox have to proceed accordingly, expecting that they can't count on him to start 150 games. He's never done it in his career, and there's no evidence right now to suggest that he is about to. Now, that being said, as long as he is healthy, he has proven he can be a good player. He was arguably one of their best. He was, frankly, one of their best hitters down the stretch last season. He had a terrific second half. He was like hitting over 320, high OPS. It was everything you could have possibly hoped for. If that version of Christian Arroyo starts the season as the starting second baseman and is actually able to stay on the field for as long as he can, that solves a lot of problems for the Red Sox. So you can make a compelling case that Christian Arroyo is like sneakily one of the most important players on the roster right now. That being said, when the Story injury broke, I asked Heim, was like, "What do you think of Arroyo?" And he's like, "Talent wise, he's got it, but we just the injuries are a real thing, so we need to kind of make sure that we have the depth around them to make sure protect ourselves and protect him." So I'm confident that they will make moves, but that doesn't mean Arroyo can't be the solution. He stays healthy. Let's put it this way: you go Duvall in center, Kike at short, Christian Arroyo at second, and pick some guy off the street as your top utility guy. That could work. Arroyo is obviously best suited as a utility guy, but under the circumstances, if he's the best you can do a whole lot worse.
Now, that was a really good take on Arroyo, I think, and something that I really hadn't considered about him as being a sneaky most important player on the Red Sox roster. Before that, you brought up if/when the Red Sox bring in a bat like an Adam Duvall. And I don't know if you've had a chance to see it or not, but Dan O'Mara laid out Duvall's spray chart from 2021 over a lay of Fenway Park. And it's something that I think should get a lot of Red Sox fans very excited to see, because it looks like a lot of doubles and home runs over the monster.
That looks pretty good, doesn't it? That's you got a guy like that in here, and if that spray chart stays the same, you're gonna be adding a lot of dents to that wall. Yeah, man, I don't even know what to say. I mean, that's a compelling case right there. Get that guy in here and watch the damage he can do to the monster, right?
So you're talking about the potential lineup. I think that puts Duvall in the cleanup spot with Kike at the second spot. So then you start off your games going left, right. And then from there, you just maybe plug in Cassis at fifth and then go from there. But I think that could be a pretty stout top of a lineup. And then with the quality pitching that we've already discussed about, this has sneaky potential for a team that could contend. I know a lot of people have been down on it, and Twitter has been very down on this Red Sox team, saying that they're going to be last place behind every other team in the major leagues, and this is going to be the worst Red Sox team in 100 years and blah, blah, blah. Realistically, this is a team that could compete at least for a wild card. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think it's in Red Sox fans' nature to be as pessimistic as possible, because that's just who, as a region, that's just how we are. It's hard to, even after all the years of championships, it's kind of, old habits die hard. But, it's true. So the thing with this Red Sox team, it's like I said with the rotation, and it's the case with the lineup. You're dealing with an incredibly high degree of variance in terms of the possible outcomes we could see here. You could get a best case scenario where everybody stays healthy, everybody produces, and this team runs over everybody en route to a World Series championship, exactly like what happened in 2013. Very similar circumstances. Or you could get what happened last year, where you're starting 4 rookies in the rotation for an entire month. Everybody gets hurt. Everybody underproduces who stays healthy, and you just just everything goes wrong. We've seen that story play out multiple times over the past decade too. So where does that leave this year's team? I think this year's team, it's funny, their floor is basically a bottomless pit. But realistically, with the talent they have, I think they should at least be good enough to compete for a wild card. They should be good enough to finish above 500. I'm not necessarily promising they're going to like win 90 games, but the thing is, like, if you're talking about an 85 win team in the AL East, that may still end up being a 4th or 5th place team. So we almost have to like separate the quality of the team from the place in the standings, because let's face it, the Red Sox were a last place team last year, and yet they were miles ahead of most of the other last place teams in baseball. You know, you look at the Pirates, you look at the Reds, you look at the Royals, you know, those teams were those were really, really rough outfits. You know, the A's, another example. The Red Sox were not that. They were a below average to bad team. They didn't like totally suck. I think this year's team should be better, which means, you know, and if things maybe go a little bit, if they're a little bit luckier, we could be looking at some really interesting and encouraging outcomes, maybe a little bit more like what we saw in 21. I'm not a, you know, I can't see the future, so I can't necessarily tell you how it's going to play out. But what I can say is the Red Sox can help their case by filling the holes, adding some people at the positions we've been discussing, raise that floor a little bit, and give yourself a chance, because the Blue Jays aren't going anywhere. The Orioles are only going to get better. The Yankees aren't going anywhere. And the Rays, I don't really understand the Rays, but it's best to assume that they're probably at least going to be decent this year too, because for some reason they always just seem to like produce all these like, you know, random guys, and suddenly they have the best bullpen ever. It's the only team they defy all logic sometimes, honestly. But all that's to say, they're I think Red Sox fans should try to not be so pessimistic, even if cautiously, you know, maybe cautious optimism is a little too strong, but like allow yourself the possibility to dream big, because there is enough potential on this team that they could surprise people.
I like that.
Yeah. So you might not have a crystal ball, but let's just for a second pretend that you do, and you can see the future. What's one move that between now and when pitchers and catchers report for spring training that you see the Red Sox making?
Well, I don't know if this is the one they would do, but everybody's talked about Ha-Seong Kim from the Padres as being a possible infield target, right? Well, let me float another one. I've heard nothing like to suggest that this is a thing that, you know, nobody from the Red Sox, no agents told me this. Ahmed Rosario from the Cleveland Guardians, I feel like is an interesting target. He is approaching free agency. The Guardians have a lot of middle infielders coming up through so between Jimenez is obviously their guy, right? You know, that guy is like going to be their franchise player probably. Rosario is a pretty solid shortstop, you know, a pretty solid infield guy who can really, you know, give you a lot of what the Red Sox need right now. And they've got a bunch of prospects, some who are already on the 40-man roster, a couple have already been called up. He makes perfect sense as a guy the Red Sox should potentially try to get. He has, you know, less team control, so theoretically he should be cheaper. And you only really need the guy for 1 year, right? I mean, if you think about it, you got, you know, Story's going to be back eventually. So if nothing else, definitely by 2024, Story will be back. So at that point, do you actually need this new guy to fill the gap? Because you keep him too long. At some point, you also get into territory where Marcelo Meyer may be an option too. So bring a guy like that in. Maybe you can get him for a little bit less than what it might cost to get some of the other guys that we've, you know, heard floated. I'd be very interested to see if that ends up being the guy. Like I said, I'm not reporting anything. This is literally just me looking at, you know, the resumes, the contract statuses, all that sort of thing. It's like, well, that one makes a lot of sense. We'll have to see if the Red Sox and the Guardians agree.
Yeah, no, that's one that definitely I could see playing out. There are a few shortstop names besides Kim. I feel like that's the one that we've seen the most. You know, like I've seen Adalberto Mondesi's name thrown out a bit, and, you know, injury history not great, but he is only 27. Paul DeJong off several off years for the Cardinals. But, this late in the offseason, pickings are so slim. The two shortstops, though, that you really see in free agency have been Andres and Iglesias. Which one would you pick of those two?
Oh, geez. I mean, probably Andrews, but it's not really a good position. If you're, frankly, I'd rather just roll with Kike and Arroyo, and maybe sign Iglesias as like the utility guy. That's at that point. Yeah, Harrison, I've heard, is Josh Harrison's another guy I've heard floated out there. I guess I'd probably rather have him if I had to pick any of those sort of bottom tier guys who are still on the market. But I think getting the really solid center fielder and just moving, just kind of rolling with Kike, Arroyo, and whichever depth middle infielder you can get your hands on. I feel like that's probably the best play at this point. Duvall is so much better, or rather, he could be so much better than any of those other guys. At least I think, anyway.
No, I agree, and it's fun like trying to play matchmaker and fantasy booker or whatever, but man, throwing out that Ahmed Rosario, that really got my brain going, because that move makes so much sense, and it's a lot cheaper than Kim. Kim would cost an arm and a leg. You would for sure be sending Houck. You'd for sure be sending some other top tier prospects to the Padres in exchange for him. And like you mentioned, he could end up blocking guys like Meyer from coming up in a couple of years. So, man, that makes so much sense to go short term with a guy like Rosario. I like it. Heim, make it happen. Let's go.
Oh, man. You got any other questions, Brandon?
One of the things that I like to try to think about whenever going into a new season is this team going to be fun? And I think we can look back at some of the years past. The 2018 team, that was a fun team. Yeah, they won 108 games, and that does tend to make you have a little bit more excitement, but just the guys seemed like a fun group of guys. The 2021 team, that was a fun team. I think all of us can sit back and remember Kyle Schwarber celebrating a routine out at first base like he just won the Little League World Series. That was a lot of fun. This team, the 2023 Red Sox, they are going to be a very fun team. Guys like Kike Hernandez and Justin Turner, those guys are great. They're fantastic clubhouse guys, and they're guys that like to have a good time. And reports that I've read from Braves fans are that Adam Duvall is that same kind of character. And I think this team, if they do bring in Duvall, even if they don't, I think this team is going to have a lot of fun, win or lose. What do you think?
I think that's safe to say. It's one thing that really kind of plays into this too. How nice is it going to be to go into a season without worrying about whether the Red Sox are going to lock up Rafael Devers? We
didn't even talk about that.
Yeah. By the way, Rafael Devers is locked up to the biggest contract in team history. I think it's just as a covering the team, as like an observer of the team for fans. I'm sure not having that cloud over this team is going to be so refreshing, right? Like, because the whole Bogarts and to a certain Devers too, to a certain extent, was so exhausting last year, and all the players felt it too. I mean, it was just looming over everything. It was just like you spend the whole season with your head in like a stockade with a guillotine over your head, just waiting for like the bad news to drop, basically. And now at least we can go into the season knowing Devers is a part of the Red Sox for the foreseeable future. There is no existential dread of that level hanging over this group. So, will they succeed? I don't know, but that part's going to be a lot more fun. Fewer games against AL East opponents means theoretically, with a more balanced schedule, theoretically, the Red Sox could maybe capitalize on slightly weaker competition. Because, like, just getting smoked every weekend by the Rays and the Blue Jays got kind of old last year. That'll be more fun. Seeing more teams come to Fenway, teams that you didn't normally get to see. That'll be fun. The pitch clock. Let me tell you, I am like, the pitch clock needs to have come yesterday, man.
Yeah.
That's
Oh
going
my
to change
God.
all of our lives. Games ending in the minor leagues, like games would end at like 9:30, like for a 7:00, start, right?
It's the best, right?
I don't think anybody really appreciates how much is going to change this year from a fan viewing experience as far as that goes. Put all that together, and Tristan Cassius is here. Brian Bayo is here. Player Whitlock, all these players we've kind of been waiting for are here. So Yoshida is an interesting wild card too. We could have a very fun season ahead. I don't know how successful, like I said, but at the very least, there is going to be a lot more joy in the baseball watching experience. I believe, at least. I think Red Sox fans, as the season approaches, and certainly once the games begin, will have good reason to believe so as well.
Ended on a high note, man. Unless you got anything else, Brandon.
No, I'm good.
Oh, gosh.
Let me tell you, when your formative experience is watching every game of the 2004 season, it's a little bit easier to see the bright side of things. It's not as. I'm hopelessly optimistic. Maybe I'm naive, but I feel like a better season is gonna be on the horizon.
Well, you definitely got in at the right time. I can't imagine being a Red Sox fan that only started watching in 2018 or 2020 for that matter, or something like that. Like we've seen the best that the Red Sox have to offer. So I think that gives us a little bit of a reasoning to say, hey, it can happen.
Oh, absolutely. We've seen the script before. We know it literally 2012 to 2013, 2020 to 2021. You can emerge from darkness real quick, man. Yeah.
Absolutely can. Now, Mac, where can people follow you? Just like social medias.
So you can follow me on Twitter at Max Cerullo, MacCerullo. Most of my professionally, I put it pretty much everything there. I have an Instagram, but it's all mostly hiking pictures and pictures of my son. So a little bit less interesting for baseball fans. And then obviously just check out my work and all of the North Shore papers, basically. Eagle Tribune, Salem News, Daily News of Newburyport, Gloucester Times. I have stuff run practically every day, it seems. So winter weekend coming up, so lots of stuff coming with that. So it should be a fun couple of weeks, and obviously spring training is right around the corner.
It's getting close. Well, thanks again so much for joining us, and we will see you all next time.
Awesome.